You're really down in like. No, that's fine. Hello, Sikander.
Hey,
How are you?
good, how are you?
We are fantastic.
It's 78.
Yeah, it is a little warm. I'm gonna try to keep the jacket on for at least the first part. Get a little comfy.
Somewhere nobody will be.
Yeah, I know. It's such a change when I came to work here, all that I didn't have to wear a tie every, because I was so used to wearing a jacket and tie every single day. I didn't see hardly anybody wear a tie unless they're like a board meeting or, yeah. We couldn't figure out how to get the.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. We
Yeah,
should,
you're saying,
I should,
no, tie.
ask
really?
the event services.
Yeah, you would think it would just either automatically come on or something, but.
Yeah,
Oh,
because
yeah.
normally it's attached to switch to lower and raise it, but there's no.
There's no-
Yeah, it's hard to turn that. It doesn't sit behind the screen, I didn't reach it. I think that term.
Yes, there's.
I didn't check behind the screen, but you.
I didn't see anything.
Right, so.
Yeah, I mean, if you guys have paper copies, there's only four of them, so if you have, as long as you have it on paper, that's perfectly fine.
They've got actually kind of a retreat for students and such today.
Oh.
So. Her plans are a little up in the air. In fact, I saw her yesterday. Her son had it. So she's got a lot of kind of.
Yeah.
Some of the-
Yeah, she was saying that.
I know.
Trade all the
Even like
data,
the
the trip,
board
the one
is on
family.
Thursday, like, be nice
So I
if
think
you
it's
had
still
some
kind of
thoughts.
confidence on it.
Make
This
one
week's
plan.
week's feeling.
Yeah. I'm taking out stuff for, and then we're gonna go to.
One is the wild lacrosse tournament in Northeast.
Right. So, yeah.
Is your husband able to, you guys gonna be?
Yeah, we're gonna do. So.
So. I.
So we'll do that, and then we're taking a family vacation in July to Colorado. My brother lives out there, so we're gonna spend a couple of days.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you guys have proposals for us today? We have one.
Okay. What do we got?
Article 28.
Okay.
Let me choose, yeah.
I'm not looking at the screen like there's something out
That's not gonna
there.
be helpful.
But thankfully, there should be enough copies.
Yeah,
Actually, there's a few extra.
Okay. So there's a few changes from
Okay.
your last proposal. So, right up top, we've reinserted this phrase, and it's slightly changed from what we had previously.
Okay.
So instead of
Were you
saying,
able to, I'm sorry, did you email it to me?
yeah, I did.
Okay, thank you.
So instead of saying, I think previously it said established terms and conditions shall not be changed without collective bargaining pursuant to chapter 44.7. I've changed that to provisions of this agreement, and that's a change you will see throughout this proposal. And I've also alluded to Article 23, which is the totality of agreement article in our contract. And then, of course, this goes on to say if the university is required to, by law or a board of governors regulation to adopt a new regulation, and that has direct and substantial impact on any provision of this agreement, again, instead of wages, hours, and terms of condition. And again, that's to kind of ensure the totality of the agreement, and the contract covers things which are not that, don't come under wages, hours, and terms and conditions. And so, yes, if the university is required to do so by law, we will impact bargain the change in accordance with Article 24. That hasn't been changed. The final sentence there, previously it read, implementation may proceed prior to completion of impact bargaining in such cases. And I've just kind of specified the cases, which would be basically where the law requires implementation by a certain date prior to the conclusion of negotiations. And that's essentially, ensuring that, it doesn't go ahead without impact bargaining if it doesn't need to by law.
So the intention is just to constrain the cases to those cases in which there's a specific timeline required in the statute or regulation itself. That's the intention?
Right.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
And then for B, we've gone back and forth on whether to use the word adopts or proposes, and I think I understand the university's position here. The fact is, like, given how we have structured the next 3 points, I think even in our case, the university, of course, has the right to adopt changes to regulation and policy. But because we have the right to refuse implementation in our unit and also, for the most part, substance bargain with these changes, in our case, the word proposes is still a more accurate description, in my opinion.
Can we talk about that word for a second?
Go
Because I want to
ahead,
make
yeah.
sure that we have the same definition.
Mhm.
So, in the whole concept of how the university is sort of operated at the board level,
Right.
and I'm not trying to be obtuse about this, can you define the point at which you believe the regulation is proposed? Are you talking about only at the period at which the regulation is formally put on the table by the board for consideration? Like, I just want to be really clear, I understand exactly what it is your intention is, because there's times when regulations are discussed or in development or all kinds of things that they may change, they may alter, they may be edited. You know what I'm saying? And
Right.
I want to make sure that we understand the timeline of your intention. Like, this is the point at which, this is the gate it passes or the threshold it crosses, at which point we think we deserve to be involved.
So could you go into that timeline a little more? Like, what would be like the beginning stage and what would be like the kind of
Well, I mean,
intermediate?
if,
I'm happy to discuss.
yeah, if you wouldn't mind, I'd appreciate it.
So if there's a new regulation or there's proposed to amend a regulation, it can start anywhere. So if, say, for example, there's a change to like the parking regulation or something, then business services and whoever handles parking will propose changes to that regulation that are then sent up to the general counsel's office. The general counsel's office puts their proposals together and works with them to make sure that it's all in the correct format. And then that proposal of the amendment or for a new regulation or amendment to the regulation is posted on a website. There's a notice period. And then that then goes before the Board of Trustees to review. And then eventually, once they've reviewed it, they can adopt it or not adopt it. So
So
I guess for us to know is it's like when there's a division that's considering a proposal to a regulation at any stage, to me, I'm thinking like,
no, I think what I would be
Is it
thinking
when
is after it's been posted and then there's that additional review.
but before it's been amended, before it's been adopted by the Board of Trustees.
Before it's been adopted,
But what if it's not adopted?
well, then it's not adopted, then.
But meanwhile, we're impact bargaining over something that hasn't been adopted. Yeah,
Or they could change it. Like, that's the other thing is we could, like, they could send it back. It could be edited, it could be amended, and then they. pick it.
And that comment period is noticed, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, there would be opportunity for comment at that point, just from anybody.
Anybody.
Yeah, right, okay.
I just don't want us to be.
Yeah, I mean,
Doing
that's
work we don't
that's
have
an
to do.
interesting point.
You know
Yeah,
what
I mean,
I'm
I think, yeah, we'll have to think about that a little more. I think there'd be no point in impact bargaining something that hasn't actually been. But then,
Right.
but if we want to actually substance bargain the change, so.
No, I mean, we can set a meeting and discuss it. There's probably a middle ground.
Yeah, but even then, like, if it never gets adopted, then it's all for nothing.
Oh, yeah, I understand. No, I understand. More for a targeted Q and A or something, I don't know.
Yeah,
I mean, it could be something similar to having a consultation with a DA representative. I heard you talking about
Yeah.
that, but maybe something where we discuss broadly what we believe the impact would be on the current contract, and maybe not go into a full bargaining at that point, but maybe just discussing where we would have qualms and where we think it would impact us,
Mhm.
and we would discuss kind of those ground settings before we go to a formal adoption. And then we would be on the same ground if we had to go to that sort of.
Yeah, I mean, that might be a way to kind of avoid having to impact or substance bargain. If we could kind of, you know, be on the same page prior to.
Yeah.
Well, we can talk about that. I think we can talk
Yeah.
about that a little bit and maybe think of some other.
you could try to time it with a notice period or something. I'm trying to think of at what point in the process,
some
would make,
trigger.
even make the best sense to talk about.
Right,
With
yeah.
consulting position, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think we understand in general terms, the intent is that you don't wanna wait until the whole thing is in and active and now we start talking about it. By
Right.
the same token, like Olivia was pointing out, if we
Yeah,
try to
I
get all
think-
dressed
I
up
think,
for the
but-
party and then the party doesn't happen, it was like, well, what
Right,
did
yeah.
what did we just do?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I think there must be additional steps in that process between, like, you know, when it's been posted to the website and then when it's finally adopted, right? So
Well,
there's
yeah, I mean,
probably like,
that's what I was thinking, like,
Yeah.
that notice period is probably the best, at least it's going to be, the regulation's going to be in the closest shape it'll be in. At least until like if the board has any changes to it or
Mhm.
decides not to adopt it, you know what I'm saying? Like,
right, yeah.
because up until that point, there can be a lot of changes in language, but once it's officially noticed, that's, you know.
Okay, I mean, yeah, as I said, you know, there's been, I think we've gone back and forth and I see what you're saying as well.
Yeah, I think at this point, I think we kind of understand what your concerns are. I
Right,
think you
right.
kind of at least heard into or get a sense of like why we don't wanna go all the way down that road.
Right, yeah,
What could be there's no reason at the end of the day, so.
right.
That gives us some, I appreciate you kind of going into that, because that gives
Sure.
us some insight into kind of maybe something we can come back with and hopefully meets your needs, you know, and we feel is also appropriate.
Sure, sure. Okay, so continuing on, again, we see the change here of any provision in this agreement rather than just wages, hours, and terms and conditions. So yes, if there's a new regulation, the university shall satisfy any collective bargaining obligation. UFFDAU must declare in writing whether it chooses to reopen relevant articles of the contract. And this is again, we've reverted to our previous language of bargain, the substance of the change to the regulation or policy. And then we added something here, saying unless such a change is a management right that impacts any provision of this contract. And that's kind of trying to address, the conversation that we had, you guys had given the example, that example, if UF decides to change like the operating hours of certain buildings, that could have an impact on our employment, but that is ultimately a management right that you guys can, change at your discretion.
So let me make sure I understand, because I'm having a little bit of a hard time following that phrase. So the intent of the unless such change component of that new proposal is to limit the reasons for which you could employ option number one? Is that the intention?
Well, so, previously, essentially, you guys had changed it to, if you had already put in a limitation saying,
Right.
that this it would be substance bargaining for wages, hours, and terms and conditions. And essentially, I was trying to ask, well, in what context would it be impact bargaining? And you guys had given this example. And so that kind of helped me understand, like, yes, there could be certain situations where it would be impact bargaining, but for the most part, it would be substance bargaining. And essentially, the only situation where it wouldn't be is where it would be kind of like, you've taken a managerial decision that is your right, but you know, it ends up having an impact on the contract.
So if we assert that a change is a change in a management right, then you're not permitted to choose to reopen the relevant articles? Is that what you're saying?
No, in that case, it would be impact bargaining rather than substance bargaining. Or rather, it'd be impact bargaining, that specific part of the change, right?
I'm just not,
Maybe it's to bargain the substance of the change, the regulation or policy for the impact of.
Yeah, I think the
The
wording's
change
a
to
bit
the-
weird, because that, number one, there is specifically about the substance of the change in regulation or policy.
right?
And we're trying to separate substance versus that impact bargaining, and I think, I mean, maybe we would just need to add a separate clause saying, when it is a major, right, it would become impact bargaining versus substance bargaining. I think that's what you're intending.
Yeah,
Right.
that was.
Maybe it's for.
Because previously you guys had removed the phrase the substance of the change.
Right.
And I had raised the concern that where would it, in what case would it not be?
Yeah, so let me ask my question here, because I think I'm following what Austin is saying here. So if, rather than saying unless, explain it to, finish the sentence for me so I can make sure I grasp it. If the change is a management right that impacts the provision of the contract, comma,
We would impact bargain that change.
okay, so yeah, I think to your point, putting those two things in the same, I think it makes it confusing for the reader
Okay.
Yeah.
to understand, because I don't think those cases, they're different cases.
Yeah, I think.
Well,
when
I mean, the
discussing-
cases have to do with whether we reopen the contract or not. And so then if this is going into, and maybe we could write two sentences
Okay,
within that,
that's
but
fine.
it's more like, yeah. We would reopen the relevant articles with the intent to bargain the substance of the
Okay.
change. If it's a management right, then we would bargain the impact.
So
Okay.
you would still reopen if it's impact bargaining? Because right now it sounds like unless it's impact bargaining, in which case this doesn't apply. But it sounds like you're saying if you're going to reopen, it could be substance bargaining or impact bargaining.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah. But it depends on the contract.
All right, so going down.
Then we also, of course, can decline to reopen the relevant articles of the contract until the end of the contract period in accordance with Article 23, preventing implementation with respect to employees in the bargaining. And I think that's, we
I
haven't
don't see any
changed.
change, I don't see any changes.
No change there. And then, 3 is waive the right to bargain over changes to regulation or policy. Allowing, and we remove the, wages, hours, and terms and conditions, and allowing its implementation, the implementation of the regulation policy with respect to employees in the bargaining unit. So I don't think we changed anything there except for, removing those, that phrase there.
But you also didn't insert your new phrase, which you used to replace wages, hours in terms of, you didn't.
Right, I mean, I figured it's implied, given that right at the top it says, if any, that's what we're talking about is if any, proposed change to regulation or policy has a impact on, any provision of this agreement, so I didn't feel like it was worth reiterating that, but.
So the intention is not to, again, say anytime there's any change whatsoever, even if it's not.
Right, yeah,
Because that was
yeah.
one of the things that we've been sort of against from the very beginning is, if we change our email provider,
Yeah,
like, you know what I'm saying?
yeah,
If we switch from Microsoft to Google and you're like, well, we want to bargain that, and we're like, look, your email address is unchanged or whatever.
right, yeah.
All right. I don't think I have any other questions.
Okay.
Obviously, we gotta talk about, we've got some stuff to discuss. Guys, have any other questions? All right. Well, we'll get this one, workshop and.
No, well, so I wanted to ask is, when are you gonna have a response for us, for Article 10 and 12?
All I can tell you is we're working on it. I'm having discussions every week about it.
So, I
As soon as we
mean-
have it, we're gonna bring it to you.
I'll tell you from our perspective, it's been 4 months almost since we gave you a proposal on Article 10.
It's a true statement.
It's been half a year at this point, since we gave you a proposal on health insurance. I mean, what is it, are you waiting for the new fiscal year or something? Like, what's the? How,
Part of it is I don't think the budget's even been signed yet for the state. I think it was presented to the governor yesterday.
okay, so is that what you're waiting for?
That's part of it. I mean, we don't have a,
So, I mean,
like I said, that's part of it, but we don't, it's hard for us. This is why we had this conversation last year about it's hard to have like mid-year bargaining on stipends, so we don't have the budget yet. So that's part of it.
yeah, okay, so I mean, from our perspective, how we proceed on several other articles, and we've already explicitly tied 7 and 10 together, but we've also.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, but also frankly, quite a lot of the other articles, 4, 5, even 13, you know, how we proceed and we're prepared to lower our demands if you give us a good offer on 10 and 12. So how we proceed on those actually really depends on.
I got you. I think that's fair.
So
You wanna know where you're gonna be on some of those other items before you're willing to really dig back into some of the language issues we put forward.
Well, what I'm saying is that, like, if you can't say with certainty that you can give us a proposal on those 2 articles, say, in the next 3 weeks, I think we should just go ahead and cancel those sessions, because we're not gonna have.
All right, so here's what I will tell you. I know that by Friday afternoon, I will know definitively if I'm gonna have something for you on Thursday.
Okay,
So if that's okay, because I do have a meeting Friday morning specifically about this topic.
okay.
I will
About
know,
both, or,
well, certainly about one, hopefully about both, but I think that's unlikely. What's more likely is we have an opportunity to bring, because we've had incredible amounts of conversation about the insurance.
okay,
But I will be able to tell you with plenty of notice on Friday afternoon whether or not I have that, because
Okay.
I'm not gonna have another meeting between Friday and Thursday. I'll know then.
okay,
And what I'll do is I'll email you and tell you, hey, look, we feel like we're gonna have something or we're not gonna have it.
okay.
And then we can, if,
And you can also be like, we will have it in 3 weeks or whatever,
Yeah.
and then we can go ahead and.
sure, okay, all right, well, we can handle that over email then. But like I said, look for an email from me probably sometime, probably around between 2 and 3 o'clock on Friday.
Okay,
You know, hopefully, yeah, I'm gonna
Yeah.
be able to meet next week and have something for you to present.
Okay.
But I don't wanna promise that at this point, because.
no, that's fine, I'll look out for you.
Oh. All right,
All right, well, thank you.
thanks.
Sorry,
Yeah.
would we, right before we started, you said you had a couple of comments or questions to make.
No, it was about this. I
Okay,
mean, so
cool.
Sikander brought it up, so I mean.
I just didn't want to forget that.
No, I just want, like I said, I want to be as transparent as I possibly can about where we stand, so I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it, and, you know, I'll email you on Friday.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah.
Should we just use this as the.
We can, which is.